Here's the thing with DMT. I find like either I'm doing it wrong or I find it really hard. I'm probably doing it wrong. So when I've tried to have like a breakthrough thing with DMT, and I smoke, so I figured it would be easy because they said it's harsh. Man, this is the harshest smoke, in my opinion, that you'll ever take into your lungs. It's like burning tire rubber. That's what it feels like. So if you take like a big pull of DMT, it feels like burning tire rubber going into your lungs. And I've done this a few times, so I'm making sure that, I'm not just saying that and somebody gave me some actual tire rubber to smoke, but that's what it felt like. I don't care about, well, I do kind of care. I don't care about the DMT experience so much, but I do care if there's a code in there that I missed. I want to see this thing. Because if I see it and everybody else has seen it, and they're talking about it, then there's something there. That'd be wild, wouldn't it? That'd be freaking crazy if there was an actual code that we could see. Okay, so we're going to get into the cult of Orpheus. We already talked about Dionysian myths. So we're kind of demystifying the occult here. So it's not the scary Freemasons or Satan show. Okay. But once we get to after this, then Dion Fortune is going to tell you the secrets that are kind of like some of the secrets that are hidden in this stuff, which is cool. So we talked about the general body of the Dionysian myth, and some of it was pretty wild. I thought it was wild, but then it kind of got taken over by the Orphic movement. Now, Orpheus was a man, though, not a god. And he was a magical musician who had the power to tame wild things, including, it would seem, wild gods and their wild worshippers. He played a lyre rather than the panpipes and the clashing cymbals of frenzied dancers and became closely associated with Apollo. Now, I know some of you know your mythology, so it's good. So a higher and more rational form of the old sun god Helios, that's Apollo. So as a poet, seer, musician, metaphysician, and religious reformer, Orpheus transformed the savage Dionysian rites rooted in blood sacrifice and orgies and gave them a spiritual significance. Yeah, that really went down. By the way, I got a weird email, and this happens sometimes, so I want to make this very clear here. This channel, I have to say it a lot of times. I don't know why, but I'll keep repeating it because I have to. This channel is simply for just open-minded, conscious explorers. That's it. But we do talk about regular life stuff here. Sometimes we chat about all kinds of different things. So somebody got Danny Goller. Yeah. Okay. That's another. It was a different guy that I was trying to reach out to, but I'll reach out to him too. So somebody got upset that I was talking about condoms, and they sent me an email talking about how, they followed for spiritual reasons, and they were all offended because I was talking about the condoms, which was an actual thing that happened to me while I was on DoorDash. Anyways, if you get easily defended, I could say defensive. If you get easily offensive, or if your body tightens up when people say certain things, if you feel you get that clench when people start talking about certain stuff, then you're probably the wrong channel. I'm just saying. I can be a very likable guy, but then all of a sudden say something that just makes you cringe. And that's who I am. So, I don't need, that was a long email too. I didn't read it all. I couldn't read it all. All right. So when Orpheus transformed all this stuff, so I think they did that so much so that some of the early Christians even saw him as a prototype of Christ. Now, Orpheus was said to be the son of the king of Thrace and the muse Calliope, as well as being the most famous poet and musician who ever lived. Apollo presented him with a lyre, and the muses taught him its use. Thus, by his songs and his music, he could charm wild beasts and even cause trees and rocks to move and follow him, which is said to account for various circles of trees or stones. After visiting Egypt, isn't it funny that they all go visit Egypt? Every single person, when you're talking about the mysteries, went to Egypt. So after visiting Egypt, he joined the Argonauts, sailed to Colchis on their quest of the Golden Fleece and his music helped him over many difficulties on the way. On his return, he married and settled among the savage tribes of Thrace with his bride, Eurydice. Eurydice, however the Greeks pronounce this stuff. So one day, Eurydice was beset by Aristaeus, which is a form of Pan, who tried to force her. And in her flight, she trod on a serpent and died from its bite. But Orpheus boldly descended into the underworld to fetch her back. He charmed the ferryman, Charon, the watchdog, Cerberus, and the 3 judges of the dead, and temporarily suspended the tortures of the damned. I really, even when I read this stuff, man, like I really feel sorry for people that actually believe that you live in a reality. It's sad, okay? It's not a judgment. It's just sad to me. That's a form of control. Even these stories, that you live in a reality that if you do bad, you're not just going to get a spanking. You're going to get sent to a place and tortured for eternity. When you look around in the universe, do you think that if you really pay attention, do you think that the thing that created this magnificent machine had time to set up a special torture chamber for people? I'm just saying, it sounds a little 50 Shades of quack to me, Anyways, so Eurydice followed Orpheus up the dark passages until reaching the sunlight, perhaps through a trick or perhaps through a lack of faith, and he looked back to see if she were there and lost her. Now, this was initially considerable conflict between Dionysus and Orpheus, because when Dionysus invaded Thrace, Orpheus neglected to honor him and taught other sacred mysteries, including the evil of sacrificial killing. And every morning he would greet the dawn on the summit of Mount Pangaeum. I'm going to say Pangaeum, that's what I'm going to say, preaching that Helios, whom he named Apollo, was the greatest of all gods. And by the way, before I forget, I'm just going to say this. So Agora, that movie that I talk about all the time with that female philosopher, is back on Amazon Prime. So if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it, because that'll really kind of give you an idea of what went down in Alexandria. So in vexation, Dionysius set up the Meniads on him, and at Dinium in Macedonia, where Orpheus was serving as a priest at the temple of Apollo. And after murdering their husbands, they tore Orpheus limb from limb and threw his head into the river Hebrus, where it floated, still singing, down to the sea, until finally carried to the Isle of Lesbos. The Muses, this sounds familiar already, doesn't it? Sounds like the story of Osiris. So the Muses collected his limbs and buried them at the foot of Mount Olympus, where the nightingales are now said to sing sweeter than anywhere else in the world. Orpheus's head, after being attacked by a serpent, which Apollo at once turned into a stone, was laid to rest in a cave near Antissa, sacred to Dionysus, where it prophesied day and night until Apollo eventually silenced it, and it was causing the other oracles, including Delphi, to become neglected. Now, Orpheus's lyre, that's the redneck version, the lyre, also drifted to Lesbos and is sometimes depicted as having his head attached. And it was laid up in the temple of Apollo until it was honored by a place in the heavens as the constellation Lyra, which contains Vega, one of the Earth's polar stars, and the precession of the equinoxes. Other stories say that Orpheus was killed by Zeus with a thunderbolt for divulging divine secrets. He had indeed initiated the mysteries of Apollo in Thrace, those of Hecate and Aegina, and those of subterranean Demeter in Sparta. The diversity and popularity of Dionysian had caused him to absorb various foreign gods, including Sabazius of, Phrygia, a supreme god and solar divinity, Basarius of Lydia, a conquering god, and Zagreus, a Cretan equivalent of Zeus. Now, this last particularly was elaborated by Orphic doctrine into a story of the early childhood of Dionysius and the creation myth of the human race. And you got to think, too, a lot of these people, I'm sure some people knew that this was like allegory, but there were people that really believed all this stuff. Like this was dogma to them, So the Orphic stories that are derived from Zagreus make Dionysius the son of Persephone, from whence he received the name Chthonios, which means the subterranean. In a late version of the tale, Demeter hid her daughter Persephone in a cave, setting 2 serpents to guard her. In the cave, the maiden began weaving a great web or tapestry of wool, which was a picture of the whole world. And while she was thus engaged, Zeus came to her in the form of a serpent and begat upon her the god who was to be his successor as a divine ruler of the world. Now, all of this was carried out according to Demeter's will, who in some respect was identified with Persephone. The child, who had horns, indicating him to be a child of Persephone, was enthroned in a ceremony by his grandmother Rhea and the Corybantes. You can tell I don't know hardly any of this. Armed maidens who danced around him. So the child's toys were all symbols of initiatory significance. All of the toys were symbols for this. So a dice, a ball, a spinning top, a cone, knuckle bones, a mirror, golden apples, a bull roar, and a tuft of fleece. Spurred on by the jealousy of the other gods, the Titans, their faces whitened with chalk, came like spirits of the dead from the underworld, and seizing the child, tore him into 7 pieces and threw him into a cauldron, standing on a tripod, where the flesh was boiled and then roasted on spits. Can you imagine telling your children these stories? Just freaking them out in ancient Greece, right? Show the dog. If the dog comes in, I'll definitely show it. Yeah. Humanity is diverse as a kind word, that's for sure. So a pomegranate tree sprang from where his blood flowed into the earth. And Zeus appeared and with his lightning hurled the Titans back to Tartarus. And he gave the child gods limbs to Apollo, who took them to Mount Parnassus and set them beside his own oracular tripod at Delphi. He was, however, reconstituted by his grandmother Rhea, and Persephone, to whom Zeus now entrusted the child, arranged for him to be brought up by a local king in the woman's quarters, disguised as a girl. And from this point, the story melds in with the mythology of the growing and adult Dionysius that we have already described. The bodies of the Titans, still wet with blood of their victims, were rendered to ashes by the lightning bolt from Zeus, and from these ashes the human race arose. So that was the beginning of the human race story. And this is what embodied the Orphic doctrine, that human beings are part good and part evil, according to the Orphic doctrine, as they have both Titanic and Dionysian elements in their nature. This mythical story was intended to reawaken in the human soul the remembrance of its divine origins and to help it to find its way back to its divine state. The Orphics taught that the soul was subject to a series of earthly incarnations, between which it resided in the underworld, subject to judgment and rewards and punishments according to the deeds of the last life on earth, until eventually it was liberated from the wheel of birth and death. Now, this process could be accelerated, however, by purificatory disciplines and rites of the Orphic mysteries, and by living ascetically and abstaining from eating meat. I would have failed that one. You telling me I can't have hamburgers and hot dogs? I'm not going to go to heaven or get rid of any of my karma if I eat a steak. I'm out. Wouldn't work for me. So along with the underworld emphasis introduced to the mysteries of Eleusis by, Iacchos and Persephone, and through the development of the myth of Orpheus descending into the rescue Eurydice, the Orphics plotted a geography of the underworld. But this, of course, is the function of funerary and initiatory rites the world over. The Egyptian and Tibetan books of the dead, to name but 2, do much the same thing. The Orphic religion was welcomed and encouraged in Athens at the time of the tyrant Pisistratus. Pisistratus. I'd be pissed if my parents named me Pisistratus, who ruled more or less from 561 to 527 BC, and his sons. A prominent courtier, Onamacritus, was a leading Orphic teacher and composer of a poem. You know, I think at some point, somebody had to have been like, man, I'm sick of saying all these names. Let's just start with some simple, basic names. How about Shelley, Joe, Bob, Mike, Eric, That's a lot easier. A new edition of Homer prepared at this time introduced the episode of Odysseus' visits to the world of shades. In general terms, beyond the vestibule known as the Grove of Persephone, with its black poplar trees and sterile willows, lay the gates of the kingdom of Hades. Hades, who had espoused Persephone, was the brother of Zeus, for both were sons of Rhea and Kronos. And his name, Hades, meant literally, what it meant was not visible or unseen. He was also called Pluto on account of the treasures buried under the earth, or more importantly, for sending up the crops that gave wealth to the land. That kind of reminds me of that Bible verse. I will give you dark treasures and hidden places, so you'll know that I am the God of Israel, in Isaiah. So at the gate was the monstrous watchdog Cerberus, usually depicted with 3 heads, although he could have as many as 50 heads at a time, bristling with venomous serpents. His function was not only to guard the gates against intruders, but also to prevent those inside from escaping, and only Hercules ever defeated him by force, and then but to carry him up to earth for a bare moment as part of one of his 12 labors. There were, however, 2 symbolic weapons that could charm or control him. One was the caduceus of Hermes, and the other the lyre of Orpheus. Various rivers flowed within the underworld. The first, Acheron, had a ferryman, Charon, or Charum, whom it was necessary to pay for a crossing. Otherwise, the soul would be doomed to wander along the deserted banks. And for this reason, the Greeks always put a coin in the mouth of the deceased. There was also the river Styx, which ran in 9 great loops, and Lethe, whose waters erased memory, and which marked the boundary between Tartarus, abode of the unjustified, and the Lucinian fields of the blessed. I'm glad I wasn't raised in Greece believing all this stuff. I'd be mortified. Mortified if I believed this stuff. The souls of the dead were but a pale reflection of the personalities that had existed upon earth, living in a kind of limbo as phantoms of what they once had been. Only those who had been outstandingly guilty suffered exemplary torment. And in the course of time, this dim place of shades began to be regarded more as a court of judgment, after which souls were allocated either to Tartarus or to the Eleusinian fields. Tartarus was a somber jail enclosed by a triple wall, and which was a diamond gate, and surrounded by the river Phlegethon. This was the place where Tantalus, Sisyphus, and Ixion, legendary sinners against the gods, suffered their punishments. In the Eleusinian fields, on the other hand, neither snow nor rain fell, and sweet breezes ever blew. It was originally the abode for children of the gods, but was later extended to include their friends and eventually the soul of all the just. I mean, think about it, man. She's going to decipher this stuff here in a minute, but think about, like, believing this stuff. What would be worse? You got all this stuff that you have to be perfect, or, you know, you could get ripped apart, or at the very least lose your memory, you know. Or you could adopt the Christian religion where you ask Jesus into your heart and you're saved. Or if you don't, you could be a Hebrew. You got to watch Agora. It's a good movie. And then you kind of, you know, you have to, I don't know, there's a lot of works and stuff. You kind of got to try to be perfect because you're the chosen or whatever, waiting on the Messiah to come. I can see where people got, like, really confused, especially in Alexandria and why the damn place burned down. And if you watch that movie, it'll kind of show you how you've got all these different beliefs coming together in, like, this one place, and how they all kind of started destroying each other. But the Orphic teachers also taught a new matriarchal theory of creation. So in the beginning, there was Nyx, or Old Night, a primeval goddess who was sometimes visualized as a great bird with black wings. And she conceived by means of the wind and laid a silver egg, from which sprang the son of the rushing wind. Phanes, or you could say Phanes, however you want to say it, a god of light with golden wings, who is also known as Eros. That is to say, he was the great primal Eros, a cosmic force of divine creative love, not the little cherubic figure of sexual infatuation later associated with Venus or Aphrodite, although this figure plays an important role in certain Rosicrucian symbology, not least in the chemical marriage of Christian Rosenkreutz. But Eros was also called Protogonos, the firstborn of all gods, and he brought into the light everything that had been concealed in the silver egg, from the sky above to the earth below. There are, of course, resonances here that are very familiar to modern Kabbalists, the old night being the Ein Sof, otherwise known as Sophia, beyond Kether, and the primal wind being like the Holy Spirit moving upon the face of the waters of the unmanifest as the divine breath. So Kether itself is like the primal silver egg from which the God of love emerges to create all that lies below. Beyond Athens, the Orphic doctrines were to undergo a significant development when they were taken up by the famous mystical mathematician, you guessed it, Pythagoras, who founded a community in Croton in southern Italy in 530 BC. The Pythagoreans accepted women into their ranks, believed in the transmigration of souls, and followed the rules of life of Orphic initiates. This community developed a number of lines of practical esoteric philosophy which have had a profound influence upon the whole of Western culture. So, now that we've investigated the historical development, it's painstaking, but we've investigated the historical development and the nature of the rites of Dionysius and Orpheus, as Dion Fortune recommended. It remains for us to consider some of the elements within the teachings that might form part of what she calls the lost secrets of the West. And these compromise a number of key ideas. So here's one. Persephone is a goddess within the earth with whom man needs to be in a creative, respectful relationship. The idea of a goddess whose realm is within the earth has been gaining currency in modern times, although its roots go back a long way. She's often referred to nowadays, and remember, this book was written in the 30s, but she's often referred to nowadays as Gaia, deriving from the very ancient earth goddess, who in Jane Harrison's book and some of Dion Fortune's rituals is known as Gi or Gi. The modern feminist movement is a part of this reappearance of the goddess, but only a part. For its wider aspects, it embraces the whole field of ecological responsibility for the environment and for the non-human species that inhabit the earth along with the human race. So even this is by no means the whole story for the earth. It's not simply a randomly located ball of plasma with an organic shell in an alien physical universe. It has realms within it which have their correspondence with inner realms that extend throughout the greater universe. Now, this is all according to Gareth Knight. But if you look at things like, I guess you could say, if you look at biogeometry, if you've had an out-of-body experience, lucid dreaming, or if you've ever had an experience with subtle energy, or if you've had any tantric experiences, or if you've had DMT experiences, you can kind of see and have probably come in contact with different realms inside or within or without this physical realm. It's really easy because you're in a physical body to believe that the material world and everything that you can only interpret with your senses is all of what makes up reality. And I mean, I'm not just saying that to like, I'm saying that because I get that way. We all get that way. We get lost in this reality and we forget that there could be, I'm not saying it as fact, but I do believe it. There could be realms within realms right here where we are, like right here. So, let's see. It has realms within it which have their correspondences with inner realms that extend throughout the greater universe. So in this respect, all the stars and planets are vehicles of consciousness of great beings of one kind or another. Now, some of them support complex forms of organic life within which spiritual beings can dwell, such as Earth under the stimulus of its parent, the Sun. Others produce the basic atomic material of the physical universe, such as thermonuclear furnaces of the stars. In this respect, even space itself is an entity, a great being not entirely unlike the Nox of the Orphic creation mythology. The inner side to the earth, which has always been known to those who live closest to it, is a realm from which our modern technological civilization has become increasingly alienated. This inner world has been variously named by different cultures, but is generally known today to its initiates as the underworld or the world of the fae or fairy. Or it could be the upside down world, but vaguely sinister or whimsically sentimental connotations may have grown up around these terms, but this ambivalence is probably inevitable, for no matter what names we choose to use, if we refuse to countenance a whole realm of reality, we cast it into our own shadow side, peopling it with projections of our own disturbed and repressed fantasies. One sees much of the same kind of mechanism in xenophobia and various forms of social and racial intolerance. I think, although I don't totally agree with that, I think, son of a bitch, that dog is back. Hold on a second. I think that, I think this is a lot of Gareth Knight's opinions too. I think he should stick to what Dion Fortune's saying here. Hold on. I got to get rid of this thing, dude, because it's about to destroy everything again. Hold on a second. Sorry, man, it's live. You can't help it. It's not in the shack though. It's causing problems in the yard here. Hold on. List. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. Man, that's trippy. I think it has everything to do with the full moon. That's why all this crazy stuff's going on around here. If you guys listened to the show a long time ago, crazy stuff used to happen out here. I had to go across the highway one time while Kurt took over the show with a freaking 38 special to run some dude off that was like, I guess he was, either that or my grandma was tripping. I guess he was spying on my grandmother or something. And we broadcasted the whole thing live. It was crazy. So I called Kurt while I was back there with the 38 looking for this, quote, guy that was bothering my grandmother. So you never know what's going to happen. Now, so according to Dion Fortune, the ancient goddess appeared at all locations to inspire the local hero and to represent the sovereignty of the land. This local element is not a matter of petty stuff, but the individual expression of the goddess at a specific location on the face of the land in relation to the particular flora and fauna, geophysical construction, and the human beings that lived upon it. So whoever lives off this tract of land becomes its subject, and whoever seeks to tend and defend it becomes wedded to its sovereignty. And the goddess therefore represents the sovereignty of the land, and the local lord or chief becomes her consort. In earlier times, we see this associated with his sacrifice for the good of the people and the land, later replaced by an annual surrogate. These are the origins of belief in the divine right of kings, although by the 7th century of our era, this had become largely a political issue. The inner dynamics still exist, however, and in a democracy, we are all kings or queens of our own field of living space, and there is ample scope for each of us to make our own contact with the goddess power within the land. And don't let anybody tell you any damn different. People would like you to think that the only power that you have is to vote, but that's not true. It's really not. It's the only power. I'm not going to go into that, but that's the only power that you are willing to deal with because it's comfortable. So there is an ancient tradition enshrined in ballad lore whereby such heroes as Thomas the Rhymer met the fairy queen on Huntley Bank and entered the Eildon Hills with her. More recently, the Reverend Robert Kirk, a 17th century Scottish divine, wrote a book upon the subject, Kirk's Secret Commonwealth of Elves, and is also said to have entered their kingdom. This tradition can be followed, and guided visualization can provide a controlled approach to these realms, which are by no means to be dismissed as only imagination. So, Gareth Knight was kind of famous for doing more pagan oriented path workings, but with the imagination, we have the embryonic organs of interior sense perception of whole worlds that exist beyond the surface appearances presented by brain consciousness. We might also turn to the visualizations of the 17th century Rosicrucian Thomas Vaughan and his entry into Mount Abignus, or to many of the symbolic diagrams of spiritual alchemy. Alternative visions can also be found in the traditions of Celtic mythology as of the Greek, both of which have had their heroes who entered the underworld. Indeed, the tradition is a worldwide one. So, by the means of the underworld initiation, R.J. Stewart, in a book and tape and workshop, has enabled many modern people to approach this inner world quite normally and safely. Its Dark Queen was known to initiates of the Lucinian tradition as Persephone, but she has many names and epiphanies. She is not merely ruler of the dead, but is also the spring maiden, she who regularly gives new life in the rhythm and polarity of the coming and going of the light in the world above. Now, you guys tell me, is this, like, I could do a whole video about the mysteries and the occult and talk about all its symbolism and all of this stuff and make it into like a satanic panic doctrine. But when you get into what this shit really means, like on all levels, it's quite boring, isn't it? It's not that freaking mystical, is it? It does have some pretty profound meanings, but it's not, it's not that, what is it? What's the word for it? It's not that crazy. Like, it's nothing to be scared of. In the world below, there is a perpetual light, that which might be called the earth light, and a power within the land, which by no means coincidentally also happens to be titles of Stewart's more recent books. The whole experience may bring about a vision and realization of the stars within the earth, which is by no means a great way from what the ancient initiates meant when they talked of seeing the sunshine at midnight. So Dionysus, as the twice-born, the discoverer of the vine and of divine inebriation, represented the inner forces and divine potential of the human individual. That's what that whole long story was about, at least that part. Now, the forces of the unconscious and of the underworld, when denied expression, can lead to catastrophe. Wait, so the underworld means the unconscious? It doesn't mean hell? It doesn't mean demons? Well, I mean, in a way it does, but it's really the unconscious, the unseen. This is a lesson behind some of the more violent elements of the Dionysian mythology. A dramatic example of this is to be found in Euripides' play The Bacchae, which we have already mentioned in regard to its relevance to personal psychology and spirituality. There is also a wider side to this question with regard to its social implications. In the Circuit of Force, we find Dion Fortune's often reiterated concern about the repressive moral attitudes of the day, which were then assumed to be the necessary price for maintaining a stable society. She was writing in the 1930s, when even the King of England was forced to abdicate rather than marry a divorcee. And since the 1960s and the arrival of easy divorce, easy abortion, easy contraception, and a considerable erosion in traditions of family life, it might be argued that the pendulum has swung quite a bit from that day. Be that as it may, it is difficult to think oneself back into the repressive moral climate that concerned not only Dion Fortune, but many others of her generation. Thus, we have her references sometimes with inflated enthusiasm to contemporary writers who seem to be on the side of progress in this matter. So we're going to get into some weird stuff here. This wasn't even the biggest. I think the biggest switch is when we had that like satanic panic back in the 80s. And I don't know, some of you are probably not old enough to remember that, but I do. Charles Morgan's play The Flashing Stream and its accompanying essay, produced and published in 1938, is hardly the greatest play of all time, but was a commercially successful and perceptive treatment of sociosexual dynamics, which assumed that extramarital sexual intercourse need not be evil if it did no harm to others, an idea which would be regarded commonplace today, but which was considered very advanced and very progressive then. Ooh, sex outside of marriage. That's can you imagine having a big political discussion about that? It also made the point, however, that physical sex was not the be-all and end-all of male-female relationships, and that sometimes restraint and chastity mattered, which may not be too welcome an attitude to more extreme libertines. Now, Dion Fortune's enthusiasm for Trotter's Instincts of the Herd in Peace and War, which was an origin, a text of 1908, which was an early treatment of the idea of the group mind or the hive mind, is in this context grounded largely on Trotter's criticism of Freudian analysts for thinking that they were curing people when they were simply reconciling them to the standards of a sick society, standards that she describes as being those of an overcrowded monkey house. A civic system of mysteries was once open to all, providing a realization of personal spirituality and access to the inner aspects of the earth through sacred drama and rites of purification and dedication. See, you can't do that now. This is kind of why everybody does it in public. You know how that book of Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun? You can't do that now. Like if you... Let's say, they kind of do it in movies, and if you go to the theater, sometimes you'll catch it, but it's never going to be as public as these guys and these occultists want them to be. They want the rites and the ceremonies and everything to be accepted deeply by the public. You can tell by how they're writing this stuff, how they're expressing it, but it's never going to be that way. It's always going to freak people out, man. It just is. And no matter how much you demystify it or tell people, hey, this is what it really means or whatever, there's always going to be some people that are just like addicted to the fear of things. You know, they just are. There's some kind of catastrophe or boogeyman or big liar out to take everything from them. That's never going to, it's 2025. I don't believe that's ever going to go away. It would take a lot of a lot of alchemical change to happen in this society for that to happen. It's never going to go away. But they still talk about it. A civic system of mysteries was once open to all, providing a realization of personal spirituality and access to the inner aspect of the earth through sacred drama and rites of purification and dedication. The public celebration of the mysteries in ancient times demonstrates that the way of personal spiritual realization or revelation does not have to be a cultish, esoteric pursuit as it later came to be when driven underground by state religious interests. I'm asking you right now, like I know Gareth Knight saying, oh, they used to do this. I don't know why we can't do it now. Do you think you could still just go out in the public and do this and everything's going to be all hunky-dory? You could probably like get a group of friends or whatever, go out into the woods, light a bonfire, make your own ceremonies or stuff. And unless it's shamanic and psychedelic, that's the only thing. Like shamanic and psychedelic stuff is well accepted now. You can do that. Some people might chuckle a little, but it's pretty much accepted by society. Now, if you went out into the woods, lit a bonfire, and started doing ceremony like this in a dramatic way, which really speaks to the unconscious, and you kind of did a drama and a play and a path working with people, if anybody caught that on film, it wouldn't be cool, it wouldn't be hip, it wouldn't be like the new thing. Somebody would use all of that film in the latest conspiratorial documentary on YouTube. Hands down, that would happen. You know I'm right about that. But neither one of those things is hurting anybody. But anyways, he goes on to say the Eleusinian Mysteries was a system open to everybody and lasted for several hundreds of years. In later times, the mysteries of Mithra, largely followed by the Roman armies, and the wall paintings and mosaics of Pompeii, bear witness to the celebration of the mysteries of Isis and Osiris, which are also the subject of the great comic novel Apuleius of Madura's The Golden Ass. This is an initiatic ludibrium, an outwardly comic tale that is the vehicle for hidden wisdom, for which I have provided a fairly lengthy exegesis in The Rose Cross and the Goddess, and its revised and expanded American edition evoking the goddess. So the great religions may provide a Noah's Ark of belief and liturgy for their followers, and the bulk of whom may evince no interest in anything but material concerns between the celebration of key personal events such as births, marriages, and deaths. So basically what he's saying here is most people only get involved with these kinds of things, and we still do today, when someone's born, their birthday, when you get married, and your funeral. But nothing else. You don't really do anything else with it. You don't use this form of ceremony or anything with anything else. And that's true. Even today, that's still true. Most people are that way. So through their very establishment as pillars of society, the great religions may not answer the spiritual needs of those who seek a deeper personal spiritual knowledge and experience than that which is provided by catechism, moral homily, and act of public worship. Thus it was in the days of the state religion of ancient Greece, and so it is today. What the official religion fails to provide will, if the need is there, be provided by agencies outside it. Mystery schools, pretty much, or mystery teachings. Although this may lead to a proliferation of sects, sometimes of doubtful spiritual and moral integrity, as has been demonstrated over the centuries, and persecution of religious minorities is no solution to this problem. The ancient mysteries, as they developed alongside the established religions of the day, provided a genuine and well-trodden way of individual spiritual realization based upon a system of carefully graded experiences. Some of the Christian church came to power, however, through the patronage of the Emperor Constantine. It became a savage persecutor of the remains of the mystery tradition, whether in the paganized form of Mithra that had been popular in the Roman army, or in the Christianized form of the Gnosis. The assumption was that the Holy Spirit was confined in its action to being an inspirer of the elders of the church, and therefore any other apparent manifestations of it must be the work of the devil. God can only talk to special people that are appointed to and anointed by. Everybody else that claims to talk to a spirit is a devil or a demon. Please watch Agora. On the other hand, there has always been a certain unease between the established religious mainstream and seekers after individual spiritual wisdom. Orphic initiates were by no means universally popular in Athens. Regarded as dissenters from official religious belief and practice, they could expect to be branded as superstitious and considered as transcendental prigs too much concerned with the state of their own souls. They were criticized for incantations, wand wavings, enchantments, and magic, noisy drumming, and filthy purification, so described because these sometimes involved daubing their bodies and faces with white mud. Their habit of self-examination was thought morbid, and a typical initiate was caricatured in popular imagination as sitting at home in clouds of incense, bespatting with holy mud in the company of a crowd of old women. Well, I mean, dude, you don't, like, I love Gareth Knight, but dude, you don't want to get too offended by that. I mean, there's still people today that say that kind of stuff about me, you know. Or do you sit around in your incense thing and wave your wand? It's like, no, not really at all. If you actually saw what happened, it wouldn't be anything super special or anything crazy that you're talking about. But I don't care to prove a damn thing to you. This is the thing. Like, I love reading about this stuff, but I really think, like, who cares what people think, man? Like, even if it's, to me, this is all based in fear, okay? It's very educational to, like, demystify the occult, but it's still based in fear because you want other people to accept what you're doing spiritually. And the truth is, even in the teachings of Christ, in my opinion, is that when you actually authenticate, most things that you want to, clap their hands and tell you it's okay, you're okay, you can do that, it's okay, good boy, good girl. Most of that stuff that you're wanting is never going to happen. And the more you authenticate, more that energy is going to start coming against you even more. That's going to want to chop you down to size, so to speak. So my point is, why even worry about it? But whatever. I'm digressing here. So Plato in the Republic complains of Orphic priests hawking tracts from door to door, and of others selling indulgences and duping citizens with wild promises of the wonders to be gained from performing their rites. That still happens today, honestly. But and it's not just like tarot readers and psychics and stuff. There are people in the church that do the same thing. So let's not get polar about it, Gareth. Much of the same might be said today of more bizarre sects and religions, but this does not detract from the fact that there is and always will, or always has been, a perennial golden thread of the mystery tradition throughout history, manifesting in different ages and different ways, sometimes driven underground by persecution, at other times working openly and subject only to mockery, even thriving as wholesome contributions to society. The Thyrsus of Dionysus is an image of the serpent power of yoga practice. That's what that meant. Developing into the paradigm of the caduceus, an emblem of healing, and the pattern is also discernible in the Kabbalistic tree of life. So that winding pattern up the tree is kind of the same thing as when you hear the stories of the vine and the staff of Hermes and the caduceus. So we shall deal with the question of the arousal of the serpent power in Yoga and Commentary B. For the moment, it will suffice to show the similarity of the yoga system with the magical weapon of Dionysus, the thyrus, or a rod surmounted with a pine cone around which wind ivy or vine tendrils had. Now, this image naturally elaborates into the caduceus of Hermes, the messenger of the gods. And we may also see how it has parallels in the Kabbalistic diagram of the tree of life, which forms the backbone, in more sense than one, of the Western esoteric tradition. Okay, so Orpheus developed the higher dynamics to be found in the Dionysian mysteries by the symbolism of the 7 or the 8-stringed lyre. The human cultural exemplar Orpheus finds the middle way, the harmonious pattern between the forces of the natural world and the heavenly heights. In basic Dionysian myth, there are many ancient and powerful symbols that come from the depths of human racial consciousness. They have their roots in blood sacrifice and orgy, headhunting, totem animals, and ancient burial rites, which are sublimated into the needs and aspirations of a later society by the Orphic tradition. In a similar way, there are oracular heads, guardian serpents, wild beasts, bloody sacrifices, which find an echo also in native Celtic mythology, much of which was rendered into the Arthurian legends, King Arthur, with the efflorescence of feudal society in the 12th and 13th century France. So one might add that similar dynamics are to be discerned in the Old Testament tales of the patriarchs, although subject to much subsequent editing. There's a lot of stuff that, oh, dude, I'm going to piss some people off when I say this, but I'll just say it like this, okay? This stuff has such an ancient tradition, the sacrificial rites of things, such an ancient tradition to break someone's body down and all of that stuff. Think about that. And even it evolved. This is why Manly P. Hall says Christianity is an evolved religion. In his opinion, Christianity was created by the mysteries and God and the Hebrew and like all these different religions that came together, and it created Christianity as an evolved religion. And if you read Hebrews, it was supposed to even evolve further from that. It wasn't supposed to be the end all be all religion. It was supposed to evolve into something even greater. but there's still ceremonies and rites that correspond to sacrifice, blood, and the partaking of eating bodies, things like that. Doesn't mean it's literal per se, but do you think that Yeshua just pulled that out of nowhere when he was talking about that? That I'm just going to make this up on the spot, and this doesn't come from anywhere. No, man, we've been doing this stuff since the beginning of time, dude. Like, we've been doing this stuff and these rituals, rites, and these ceremonies and these things that had deeper meanings since forever. And a lot of the stuff that they don't talk about in the Old Testament, which I think you should read, like A History of God by Karen Armstrong, there were God battles, man. You know, Yahweh won the God battle against all these other gods from bolts of lightning and different other things that happened too that proved it was the greater God or whatever. But there was all kinds of different tribes and Canaanites and people that were worshiping this God or that God. It's pretty crazy when you get into the history of it. So they're sometimes considered to be an archetypal opposition between that which is called Dionysian and that which is called Apollonian. The first stands for free expression of the instincts, the latter for the conscious organization and control. In this context, Orpheus, with his lyre, which is a gift from Apollo, his descent into and return from the underworld, and his seeking the company of wild beasts, and his ability to tame their fierce natures may be seen as a mediating figure. In tarot imagery, he has an equivalent in the trump called Strength, you know, the maiden that's kind of petting the lion or leading the lion. So Pythagoras developed the lyre of Orpheus to reveal inner and outer harmonic structures, patterns in consciousness reflected in the outer world. And this is kind of where like sacred geometry and all that stuff started its beginnings. What the Pythagoreans discovered with the lyre was a system of harmonics based on the quality of whole numbers, and numerology too. And this can be applied directly to mathematics, in particular to geometry. I didn't read ahead. And thence by application to architecture, as may be seen in the proportions of ancient temples and ecclesiastical buildings of the high Renaissance, deriving from followers of the Roman architect Vitruvius, whose work embodied Pythagorean principles. The human perception of tone provides a unique meeting point where the spiritual perception of the human being meet the outer structures of the created world. The original and archetypal lyre may have had only 3 strings, emblematic of each element of a classic 3-tiered universe. But for the full development of Pythagorean metaphysics, we can see the number of strings as 8. And this gives the required number of notes for a full diatonic scale in the Western form of harmony, although the practical method of playing probably used a more complex system that was more than a simplistic allocation of one string to one note. I think, R.J. Stewart points out in Music and the Elemental Psyche, by the technique of a lightly part stopping a string, a skilled player upon the lyre can produce a whole range of, I guess, partials or high harmonics that give a considerable range and scope of tones and semitones after the manner of a modern pianoforte, especially if the 8th note is tuned to a half tone below the actual octave. So the Pythagorean system of harmonics is capable of very great complexity. Its developments fill many a library shelf, and any further analysis of it really belongs to a work on more general principles of Hermetic philosophy. I find that super fascinating, actually. If you get into like sacred, okay. If you get into like sacred geometry, numerology, and like music theory, and then start trying to tie it together with frequency and tones, and then look into the tarot and see that the builders of the adytum actually had a note that corresponded with each of the tarot cards or the arcana, there is definitely a resonance or a conscious, I guess you could say, an experience for each note that you can listen to. I'm going to have to talk about that one day. All right, 3-minute break here. We'll be right back. This is the last show of the week. So I hope you're finding this interesting because I'm trying to like de-occult some of the hidden stuff too. Recommended movie for the weekend though is definitely Agora. If you have Prime Video, you haven't seen it, go watch it. Alrighty, we'll be right back. What's this? I don't know what this is.
So glad to see you have overcome them, completely silent now. With heaven's help, you cast your demons out. And not to pull your halo down around your neck and tug you off your cloud. But I'm more than just a little curious how you're planning to go about making your amends to the dead. To the dead. Recall the deeds as if they're all someone else's atrocious stories. Now you stand reborn before us all. So glad to see you well. And not to pull your halo down around your neck and tug you to the ground. But I'm more than just a little curious how you're planning to go about making your amends to the dead. To the dead. With your halo slipping down, your halo
All right, so we'll get back in it to the circuit of force here. So the Lyra and the Caduceus and the cosmic doctrine. So it's interesting to note in the cosmic doctrine, Dion Fortune's early work of received interplane communication in 1923, which was a combined glyph of the Lyra and the Caduceus, plays quite an important part. There was a certain ambivalent attitude towards this text, and it remained a guarded secret until 1949, when a closely edited version was privately printed, since Dion Fortune's successor considered the original a most dangerous book, an epithet that was also applied as it happens to the circuit of force. And the edited version of the 1949 version, the sections dealing with the Lyra and the Caduceus were largely omitted. Now check this out. This is what they thought was dangerous. This involved 2 chapters, one entitled The Law of Impaction and the other The Law of Polarity, which in the original text had been respectively entitled The Law of Impaction, or the transmission of action from one plane to another, and the Law of the Aspects of Force or Polarity. Now why the hell did they think that was dangerous? Like, she literally took it out of the book because they thought it was dangerous to talk about. These chapters have been restored and form part of the complete and original text in the 1995 edition of the Cosmic Doctrine that is now published by the Society of the Inner Light. It's difficult to see just what was regarded as dangerous in these chapters. It is quite a difficult text requiring considerable intuitive powers to understand it, and so is likely to try beyond endurance the patience of any less than the worthy reader who seeks to penetrate its secrets. So I can't think of a reason why anybody back then would think that, like, teaching people about polarity and inner planes would be dangerous, unless maybe they thought it was morally dangerous. Maybe I can't think of a reason why either. I don't think Gareth Knight knows why either, and I don't think also Dion Fortune ever talked about why she thought, or they thought, it was a dangerous thing to put in the book. Because she doesn't believe in subjective morality. She never has. So I don't know. That's a little strange. Honestly, that is weird to me. That's not a super conspiracy or anything, but it's weird that would even happen. So one piece of advice that is given in the restored paragraph is to superimpose the one esoteric glyph upon another in order to elucidate and understand them, especially if the principal application of each one is to a different plane. Thus, it recommends that we try placing the Caduceus, that is called the glyph of Mercury, otherwise Hermes, the Lord of the Mind, upon the Lyra, which is described as the glyph of Orpheus, Lord of the Elementals. Okay, so in this application, the Lyra can be regarded as having its strings representing the 7 planes of existence, which have, of course, been laid down by the primordial elemental powers. We must remember that the elemental powers are not just associated with the forces of physical nature, but proceed right up the planes to form the holy living creatures represented by the lion, the eagle, the bull, and the man, that are the archetypal elemental powers at its highest spiritual level. You know, I've also thought too, like, there's a few books in the Bible that you can tell where, in my opinion, where there's a lot of hidden mystery in, because they talk about those 4 creatures quite a bit in the Bible. I think Ezekiel being one book and Revelations being another. But if you ask an Orthodox person, what does that mean? They just think it means simply, the 4 aspects of God or something even simpler than that, and they don't really go into it. But it's obvious that if you read Revelations and really get into it, it means quite a bit more than that. The 7 candlesticks, all kind of adds up, doesn't it? The caduceus that we superimpose upon the lyre may then be regarded as representing the intelligent forms of consciousness that at their various levels express themselves upon the planes that have been laid down by the elemental forces. C.T. Loveday, Dion Fortune's close collaborator at the time this material was received, took the trouble to make diagrams upon the lines described. These are reproduced in the 1995 complete edition of the Cosmic Doctrine, and we provided a version here too. Now, Loveday's version of a lyre is somewhat unorthodox in strict musical terms, and that in a real lyre the strings run the other way, that is to say, up and down rather than from side to side. However, his version shows clearly enough what was no doubt intended by the communicator, and if a real lyre were being used, it would simply be necessary to turn it on its side. We can, however, usefully explore some of the ancillary symbolism that results from whichever way we diagrammatically construct the lyre. With the arms of the lyre conceived as being at each side, they take the symbolic place of the pillars of a manifestation associated with the Kabbalistic tree of life. That is to say, the planes are stretched between the points of positive and negative expression. If we're to take a more physically accurate representation of the actual musical instrument, then the strings should be stretched from top to bottom. That is to say, between the other great polarity of spirit and matter. So you have, this is another thing too. I wanted to get into this later, but when you look into the occult and you see the cube of space, it doesn't just represent like physical. It does represent the physical plane, but it represents where you are in the physical plane, but also has an esoteric meaning to each face of the cube too. So you got heaven, earth, positive, negative poles, masculine, feminine, the future and the past, and you'll see that little line in the middle where the heart is, which is like the present moment that's inside that cube. So we shall see there has been some criticism of this way of depicting the planes on the part of the followers of traditional yoga systems. They say that one plane piled upon the other in the form of a layered cake may have its uses as an elementary guide, but it's altogether too simplistic to represent a complex reality. And that's a terrible drawing. Now, here's the thing though. Rather than visualizing layered planes in this fashion, we should realize that they are all part of a uniform whole in which various vibrations or resonances can sound. That is to say, that spirit, intuition, mind, emotions, or atma, buddhi, manas, whatever distinctions we choose to make, exist all together in one totality. We ourselves are not layered in the way that simple diagrams suggest, but respond within ourselves to different wavelengths or frequencies of expression. In this respect, a plane, a quote plane, when you look at pictures, it always shows them stacked or something, but if you look at it in this respect, a plane is more like a sounding string that passes from heaven to earth, rather than as the gap in between steps of a wire or a ladder. So this may, of course, be a more accurate representation of the truth, but is not quite so helpful to the beginner. Another more advanced way of looking at things applies to the caduceus, where in modern symbolic usage, it's always represented as having its wings just below the serpent's heads. Now this has a symbolic validity that is plainly expressed in various works and is not difficult to justify from simple observation and a little intuitive thought. However, if we turn to the ancient world, we will find that on many occasions the wings are placed at the bottom of the staff rather than at the top. We don't need to worry about this too much, for in depictions of the god Hermes, he will be found to have winged shoes as well as a winged helmet, so it doesn't really matter. But this implies that the whole of the human psychic makeup is capable of flying upon spiritual wings, not just the higher centers. And we will find this point brought out in the symbolism of the winged bull in Dion Fortune's novel of that name. It is not only birds and angels that fly. Now, as the review in the Inner Light magazine remarks Jane Harrison's, I think this is prolegomena to the study of Greek religion, is of particular interest to the student of the mysteries, in that it charts the rise, and the whole reason why we read all that stuff is that it charts the rise in the belief that man can pass from the human to the divine. Fragments of a ritual for the dead, which also means an entrance to the underworld for initiates, have been found inscribed on thin gold amulets. These are quoted in full in an appendix to Harrison's book and also in the review. They are worth reproducing here alongside parts of a rite of Isis which appears in the Sea Priestess, which is, and moon magic for the light they throw on the source of some of Dion Fortune's work. So here's what's on the Patalia tablet. It says, "Thou shalt find on the left of the house of Hades a wellspring, and by the side thereof standing in white cypress. To this wellspring approach not near, but thou shalt find another by the lake of memory, cold water flowing forth, and there are no guardians before it. Say, I am a child of earth and of starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. This ye know yourselves, and lo, I am parched with thirst, and I perish. Give me quickly the cold water flowing from the lake of memory, and of themselves they will give thee to drink from the holy wellspring, and thereafter among the other heroes thou shalt have lordship." Everything, no matter what you look at in the mysteries, everything always goes back to that divine union of spirit and matter, heaven and earth, male and female, positive, negative, all that stuff. Here is the rite of Isis. Sink down, sink deeper and more deep, and to eternal and primordial sleep. Sink down, be still, forget, and draw apart. Sink into the inner earth's most secret heart. Drink of the waters of Persephone, the secret well beside the sacred tree. Waters of life and strength and inner light. Eternal joy drawn from the deeps of night. Then rise, made strong with life and hope renewed. Reborn from darkness and from solitude. Blessed with the blessing of Persephone and secret strength of Rhea, Bina, and Gay. Who? Why did they keep, man? So, I really get the romanticism of all this. I do. And how it all was like, the secrets are all buried in this stuff. But we have to remember too, this is why, as a homework assignment, if you're into this side of void walking, some people don't even care about this stuff. But if you do, if you're really into the occult side, or let's say ancient history side, if you really want to understand this, most people would point you to a book or all these different books and stuff. But if you just watch that movie Agora, and I know I keep saying it, it doesn't go into deep details about how things came about. But it does show a really good representation of the mindset, the psyche, the emotions of the people, and how all these different beliefs and religions begin to clash back then. And that our very history, our whole timeline that we, this year's 2025, it's literally 2025 after the death of Christ. So that whole thing that happened needs to be studied more. We don't look at it enough. We either take upon a belief or we just forget about it and say it doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, and you think that this earth is, and all your five senses is all there is, then we got nothing left to talk about. But if you think there's something more to it, and that something crazy really did happen back then, I think looking into this stuff is super important. We're never going to know all the answers because we weren't there. And the only thing that I can think of that we could do, if it was even possible, and Daskalos said it was possible, and I don't hear too many people saying, maybe Daskalos wasn't right. Dr. Stylianos Ateshlis. But he said that we can learn exomatosis, or the out-of-body experience. We can get out of body, go back in time like he did and witness with our own eyes what actually happened. Now, wouldn't that be cool as shit if we could do that? He actually did it, he says. And then some of his books about the mysteries that Daskalos wrote, and the book on the Tree of Life and all that stuff, a lot of that was based upon his OBE experiences where he went back in time and witnessed what happened. But you have to believe that that's real. And there's no proof of it. And for like OBE travelers like me, you know, I'm still trying to increase my abilities of conscious exploration. But I'm still trying to get out of the freaking neighborhood sometimes when I get out of body, or I still hear people talking about OBE experiences as if they're lucid dreams or something. So how the hell do we get from that point to what Daskos is talking about? And then 90% of the people that come on YouTube or Gaia or whatever, there's always these people that market themselves as like spiritual experts, and then we begin to follow them. And yet, no matter what they're showing us or teaching us, we can't actually do exactly what they're teaching. And if you've been a truth seeker as long as I have, you know exactly what the hell I'm talking about when I'm saying all this. So there's something that we're missing. All we have is like these books and movies that kind of correspond with the history of what we think happened. I will say this. I looked into it myself, okay? Like, I've done my own research as deeply as I could based on what's available on the internet as far as like what happened during the era of Christ. So we had all this mysteries, the mystery schools, all the way back from Babylon to as far back as we don't know when, right? And all these things that happened. And then we have the Bible, and then we have certain things of like history that we can verify and lots of things we can't. The only thing that I know for sure that's probably, I would say 99%, well, 90% provable is that Christ, or someone was followed like Christ and did, something did happen. Because there are other writers that write about it that it's not in the Bible, that have nothing to do with the Bible or religion. There's plenty of writers that talk about, hey, there's this thing happening in Rome, and this dude is getting crucified, and he's got a ton of followers. There's people that were like making fun of it too, in a sense, in some of their books. I forget their names, but I read it. So something definitely happened, and something definitely happened before then. So we must conceive of the personality as receiving energy from two sources: the spiritual energy drawn into it through the realizations of the mind, and the elemental energy flowing into it through the etheric double. Okay, so it will be observed that I do not refer to the body as a source whence energy may be taken up by the personality, and upon this omission hangs the whole theory of yoga as the culture of the etheric double. The physical body is of the earth. It's earthy. Its processes are a matter of chemistry and physics. Its activities a matter of mechanics, hydraulics, and magnetics. The contact between a man and his body is made by means of his etheric double, just as the contact between him and his car is made by the pressure of a foot and a hand on a pedal, lever, or a wheel. Okay. If y'all been following the show, who else said that? It has nothing to do with the occult. Nothing. Muldoon said that. Muldoon, who wrote his book about out-of-body travels in the 1920s, is saying the same exact thing as these occultists are saying in the 30s. He said it in a more simple sense, that your consciousness, the person that you are, that I'm talking to right now, that hears me, that's in the body, isn't that body at all. It's your etheric double. In fact, this is the etheric double is like who you really are. Damn, how do I explain it? It's not like who you really are. It's more like if you were to remove your etheric double from the body, okay, then and someone like hooked up electricity to the physical body, it would probably just flop around. It wouldn't be conscious. You couldn't grab a cup. Like as soon as I think about it, I grab it. It just wouldn't happen. You just flop around. But with your etheric double, the spirit that you are that's in the body, now you can play the game, right? If that makes sense. It's hard to explain. But anyways, my point about that is like Muldoon is an OBE traveler. Didn't give nothing. Didn't care about the occult, nothing. And here you have an occultist saying the same exact thing in the 30s. Both saying that the etheric double is who you really are. It's the thing that's inside the body that's running the show. That's running the avatar. So the contact between a man and his body is made by means of his etheric double, just as the contact between him and his car is made by gas pedals and wheels and levers. So the analogy is an exact one, for the body derives its energy from electrically determined internal combustion, even as does a car. And the consequences of depriving a car of gas are precisely the same as the consequences of depriving a man of food and water. It is with the etheric double that we are concerned in the study of yoga, and the physical body only comes into it so far as its postures determine the nature of the circuit in which its magnetism operates. That's some pretty deep stuff that it just was revealed right there. So the primary unit of matter is agreed to be the electron, which, as its name implies, is a unit of electrical energy believed to be of the nature of a vortex. No man has seen an electron with the naked eye, however, nor the atom, which is held to be composed of a constellation of electrons, nor even the molecule, which is believed to be formed of a group of atoms, and any one of these is, taken by itself, too small for our perception. So we have to conduct our investigation of matter, and masse as it were, and deduce from our study of its bulk the nature of its units. We know enough to know with certainty and precision that matter is not self-existent in the form in which we perceive it, but is the end result of the organization of pre-existent energy. It is used to be believed that energy was the result of the breaking down of physical molecules, but we know nowadays that electrical and radioactive forms of energy exist apart from the combustion or chemical combinations of material substances. But as we do not know of any form of existence of physical substance, even the most inert, that does not possess its own inherent energy. So we may reasonably conclude that the existence of energy preceded the existence of matter, and that there may be a transitional phase which can aptly be termed pre-matter or materializing force, according to which way we look at it. So what is he getting at? That's a long way of saying that energy existed before anything physical came into existence. And you can tell by looking at everything on a molecular structure and at anatomic structure that that's the case. It all has to come together and work together based on some kind of energy for it to do what it does. So he's hinting towards a few things here. So physical science is beginning to tell us something about the nature of the magnetic field of the physical body, which esotericists call the aura. But for any detailed information on the subject based on extended observation and experiment, we must go to the East and learn from the yogis, with, however, the handicap and complication that there is little love lost between the East and West, and even less understanding, and that the yogis, having no scientific tradition of the pooling of knowledge, are masters of the sister arts of suppressio veri and the suggestio falsi. The Indian initiate will not give out the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and the white initiate may not. Will not. So the Indian initiate will not, and the white initiate may not. That's a weird thing to say. I, however, who am an initiate of the Western, but not the Eastern tradition, stand in a position of peculiar advantage, for I can take the Eastern teachings and methods, and comparing them with what I know of the Western methods, say that this is what you really mean, quite apart from what you choose to say. And the sources of my information are the works of Sir John Woodruff, which are the only scholarly investigations in the field of yoga, and those of Madame Blavatsky, who knew a great deal, and knew a great deal more than she told about. These throwing light on each other and interpreted with the help of a working knowledge of the principles of physics and a pretty intimate knowledge of not only the principles but the practical applications of psychology, combined with a quarter of a century's experimenting and observing in this remote and rocky field, have supplied me with such explanations I have to offer my concerning the science of art and yoga, and I do not fancy I am very far out so far as I go. So who cares, man? Why are you telling us all this stuff? What is it with the freaking people, man? They got to explain themselves. Like, first, before you buy anything that I'm about to say, let me tell you what I've been through. It's like, dude, just tell me what you think, man. I believe you. He says, though I do not for one moment flatter myself by believing that I know all there is to know, it is only a mortal as ignorant as he is rash who will set a limit to knowledge in any direction. Yeah. I get it, dude. Like, I don't know everything. Just say that. Just say, man, I've got tons of experience in all this stuff. I've been an occultist all my life. I've studied yoga. I've studied science. I've studied all this stuff. So that's all you got to say, man. Here we go again. Look at this. This is why. This is why when people read occult text, they freaking throw them sometimes. Like, what's the point? Let's just pick up a grimoire and read about demons, because this stuff gets old, man. You don't have to explain yourself. The Ginza story of the soul entering or not the body is kind of similar. I don't think I've ever read that. See, this is what I'm talking about. I have no doubt that whatever I will have to say will be criticized and discredited as not according to the Oriental equivalent of cocker by those qualified. Who cares, man? Look, you're not going to be able to prove this anyway, so just say what you think based on where you've been. I believe that I have, in some measure at any rate, succeeded in drawing back the veil, because what I have to say can be tried out experimentally and proved to work. All right, now, give us the info. It must be borne in mind, however, that the Occidental viewpoint diverges fundamentally from the Oriental, just as the Europeans' physical habits differ from the Asiatics. I do not therefore admit the plenary authority of Oriental experts. No one cares. No one's trying to call you an expert. I'm gonna skip this, man. This gets on my nerves. I'm sorry. Yoga is not foolproof, and it is possible, by the indiscreet use of its methods, to disorganize one's etheric double very thoroughly, and one then sees the part the etheric double plays in one's economy. It affords the key to more than is realized. So he says, I've observed unfortunate and even disastrous consequences follow upon disregard of this precaution, ranging from nervous exhaustion and incoordination through various degrees of mental unbalance to a death in acute mania. Well, I mean, that's unfortunate, but doesn't that prove that you're right? If you've observed all this stuff, you've seen people go crazy, you've seen people die, trying to mess with this energy in all the wrong ways. I define the etheric double as the magnetic field of the physical body, the existence of which requires no demonstration by me, being a well-established fact. We will therefore proceed to the next question. Whence does the etheric double derive the energy that animates it? Yeah, we should have got to that a long time ago. Physical science regards it as the emanation of the physical body, and its energy is derived therefrom. Esoteric philosophy disagrees with this, believing the physical body to derive its existence from the etheric double, and that the magnetic field surrounding living creatures, of which the scientist is well aware, is the unabsorbed portion of this basic energy. The esoteric philosopher, therefore, does not regard the physical body as the source of magnetic energy, and therefore he does not, if he is well informed, regard the diet and regimen of the body as directly affecting consciousness, but rather as affecting the body itself and thus rendering it either an inefficient or inadequate instrument of consciousness. Just as the mechanical condition of a car does not make any difference to the health of the chauffeur, though it does make a very great difference to the efficacy of his work. The principal sources of our knowledge of yoga are Hindu, and the Hindu not only has religious objections to the eating of meat, but is condemned by custom and circumstances to exist on a diet which all authorities agree to be definitely unsatisfactory. He is born and bred in malnutrition, and this applies to the well-to-do as well as the less prosperous sections of the community, because Indian ideas on dietetics and hygiene in general are, to put it mildly, not very well informed. Well, not all. I mean, I'm sure. I've never been to India. I don't know. Maybe he's right. This was written in the 30s too. So what is luxury for an Indian is privation for a European, and their repressive physiological processes have adapted themselves accordingly. It is a well-known fact that fasting leads to what are called hallucinatory or revelatory visions according to the viewpoint, but let us bear in mind that hallucinatory visions can be revelatory, as Freud pointed out, and the respective dreams. Even though they bear no relation to the facts of objective existence, they may, and often do, bear a very definite relationship to the facts of subjective existence. The facts of subjective, why can't I say that? The facts of subjective existence. All religious disciplines, Catholic, Mohammedan, and Buddhist, as well as yoga, have availed themselves of this principle in order to afford their devotees direct mystical experiences. For this and such methods are undoubtedly efficient, but so is the use of hashish, mezcal, and other hallucination-producing drugs, and these have been used from time immemorial for precisely this purpose. I've never used mezcal. Mezcal being the sacred plant of the Indians of the New World, and hemp, from which bhang, a form of hashish, is made, occupying a similar position in Asia. So whether it's the method of extending consciousness by the chronic method of restrictive dieting, or the acute method of drugging or fasting or psychedelics, or the results through psychologically efficient or physically disastrous. And these results are, in my opinion, obtained by altering the balance of energy between the physical and the etheric bodies till their normal polarities are reversed, and then the latter predominates. So the physical body, so far as its physiological processes go, is under normal conditions a self-regulating mechanism. But there are certain states in which the atomic level of the mind suffers invasion by the subconscious level. Hysteria is an outstanding example of this condition, but there are also subtler and less readily recognized conditions among the neurotic states and even more elusive forms of dual control when prolonged emotional tension reacts on all levels of the being. It is this latter condition which affords the fruitful field tilled by the various forms of mind healing, and to say this is not to disparage them, for they meet a great need which orthodox medicine cannot deal with. A man is no less ill if the working of his stomach or his kidneys is upset by prolonged anxiety than if they are disordered by invading bacteria. Oh, do you think, let me ask you a question, man. Do you think that they don't simplify things in these books because they feel like I've got to fill out 200 pages of information? Do you think that's why they do that, or they really need to say everything that he just said? 2 sentences, right? Your stomach and your kidneys can be either diseased by a disease or diseased by emotional stress or psychological stress. They're still equally a disease. Shorten paragraph. But in addition to such unconscious and undirected interference with the atomic control of the bodily functions, it is possible to achieve conscious and directed control of them, of your subconscious mind, and through it, you can acquire control of your atomic mind. And so, of the physiological process is usually regarded as beyond the influence of the will. But don't some of these guys, like, it's pretty true that some of these guys have, like, stopped their hearts or meditated and not ate for freaking months at a time. How long? Let me look this up real quick. I'm just curious because I don't know the truth to this. How long has a yogi went without food or water? An Indian yogi claimed to have survived for approximately 70 years without consuming any food or water. That's a claim, though. There's no freaking way, man. I've seen those guys do some crazy stuff, though. But, I mean, to me, that you're just hallucinating at that point because you're barely in your body. You're hanging on by a thread. I think that's kind of like what Gareth's point is it's not really, you could be reversing the polarities between your etheric and your physical body, and that's why you're having all these experiences. But yoga practices by concentrating the attention on breathing, the heartbeat, and the principal nervous plexuses cause us to become conscious of them. And as we become conscious of them, we acquire control of them. The yoga method of picturing in the imagination the inflowing and outgoing of the pranic force as rays or clouds of light is an effectual method of manipulating the subconscious mind, which responds to the imagination but not to the will. The yogi employs this method for the culture of the etheric double, which is as responsive to exercise and regimen as its physical counterpart and can yield very remarkable results both as to physical energy and the extension of consciousness when thus trained and developed. But the line is narrow between the achievement of control of the etheric double and the breaking in upon the atomic control or the automatic control of the physiological processes. And it is here the danger lies, and to avoid it, the guru must be careful and experienced, and the chela obedient, properly prepared and working under suitable conditions too. That's crazy that I wouldn't even attempt that. To me, that's just crazy. It's cool, like, to get, like, it'd be cool to just get there and witness it for a little while, but why keep going, 20 years? That can't be real, man. I mean, unless the body is, you guys have seen the pictures of some of these dudes attempting this stuff, right? They're so freaking, like, skinny and weird looking, It's still pretty fascinating, though. Anyways, this book is really cool if you get into it and read it, because it gets into the deeper mysteries of, like, the circuit of force, the etheric double, the energies between the body and the inner realms, and the kundalini, and pretty much all of the secrets of the occult are kind of talked about in this text. So you guys check it out. And I might do another broadcast this week to make up for missing Tuesday night. But if I do, it'll definitely have to do with seeing that code on the DMT thing. I got to look into that more, though. Or if, anybody wants to hit me up, it happens to know anything or might have can point me in the direction of where some DMT is, and I may or may not go looking for it after I figure out if this, like, code is real or not. Mike Maxey says, I think he just wants to be very precise when he's saying stuff. Yeah, the no water part is unbelievable. I can see the sunlight and water diet guys being, it just doesn't make sense. Like, at some point, unless he's, like, powering up his etheric double somehow and living off of it in a way that we don't understand, I just don't. There's no way you could go 76 years without food or water. I ain't buying it, man. It's still super fascinating what those guys pull off, though. So the biggest thing that I took from all of this information, and why I think most people don't really get into the occult that much, is because it's kind of monotonous and boring, and there's all this stuff. It's just more fun to make a conspiracy out of it. But that the biggest thing that I found that was cool that I did not know is that Gareth Knight is talking about the etheric double in a way that Muldoon was talking about the etheric double, but he didn't call it the etheric double. He called it the phantom. But he talked about it just like they're talking about it. Two separate people exploring consciousness in two separate ways, one not really having anything to do with each other, both describing the etheric double the same exact way. That's pretty rad. That's pretty rad. And I've walked in my etheric double, so I know it's real too. All right, you guys. That's it. I've tortured you enough tonight. It was fun. I'll be in the Discord and try to get something out for the members and patrons and all that stuff this weekend too. I'd hope. What do you want to go out on? What do you listen to before we get out of here? How about some Black Keys? Yeah. Do that. Night, y'all. Sweet dreams.